It's fantastic to have you. We talked for a minute before the show. As I said, I've been following your work now for years, and I'm just amazed with these anomalies that you've discovered on different celestial bodies. The first topic I was hoping we could discuss is Iapetus and all the incredible information that you've got compiled on your website that points to it possibly being an artificial moon even. It looks just like the Death Star, in my opinion.
Isn't that amazing?
It is, yeah,
That is so
absolutely.
eerie. Well, actually, Rex, we should go back to the beginning. I used to be, straight mainstream, as you said, Cronkite's advisor, NASA, etc., museums, mainstream science, hung out with Carl Sagan, Arthur Clarke, one of my best friends, obviously, until he died, and Gene Roddenberry and all that. And anyway, so what got me into all of this, and why we're having this discussion this evening, is about 30, 40 years ago, I started looking at some images of Mars, and I realized that there was something astonishing that other scientists, other journalists, other investigators had not all put together, and that is that there appears to be a global civilization, an ancient, extraordinarily high-tech civilization that once lived on Mars and is no more. And that collapses probably 20 years into one sentence because NASA has not been cooperative. They're the ones initially taking all these images, and it's only because of leaks, because of finding other versions of images, of finding people who are willing to talk about what they've seen in the labs like at JPL or in Houston or other places at NASA, that we've kind of pieced together the idea that NASA for the last 50 years, if not, slightly longer, given that its first spacecraft was launched in January of 1958, it has been engaged in a methodical, systematic cover-up of everything that's real in the solar system made by somebody. They'll tell us the geology, they'll go on about the magnetospheres and the radiation and the particles and the layered sediments and the various atmospheric processes. The thing they cannot go near, the thing that they won't touch, the thing that they haven't told us the truth about from day one is the fact that we are living, Earth now, 21st century, we are living and orbiting in a previously inhabited solar system whose inhabitants wielded technology that was basically the equivalent of the gods. As my old friend Arthur Clarke would say, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. This technology, this physics, is basically magic. It seems to contradict what we think we know in terms of EM physics. And it allowed them to remodel and remake and reorder the entire solar system. And then something incredible happened a long time ago, millions of years ago. We really don't have any kind of an exact date yet because we don't have ground truth. And everything went away. And we're what's left. We're the survivors. Are we the survivors of the guys who originally did all this millions or even billions of years ago? Is the human race the logical successor, genetic successor to these beings? I have no idea because, again, we don't have ground truth. But, Rex, what I can say to you tonight is that everything that NASA has told us about the solar system, everything that ESA, which is the European Space Agency, has told us, everything the Japanese have told us, everything the Russians have told us, everything the Chinese and the Indians, and am I forgetting anybody who sent spacecraft into space? I don't think so. Every one of these nations is part of a cabal to basically withhold announcing, discussing, presenting, describing, outlining, or explaining the real artificial stuff out there, which is all over, from Mercury, we now know, to Pluto. And instead, they've given us a sterile solar system, sans the works of intelligence, because somehow that subject, who we really are descended from, and what really happened in the past is all taboo.
Well, and why do you think that is? Why don't they want us to know where we came from?
That's the $64 million question. And again, I can speculate. I can refer to certain comments by officials. I can refer to news reports, how at the end of every news report, regardless of what network, regardless of what station, regardless of what country, If they do UFOs or ETs or any kind of off-world story, it's always called the kicker. It's always at the end of the newscast, and it's always ha 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 ha. Isn't that funny?
Right.
Systematically, we are being programmed and have been programmed for obviously decades, if not centuries, that we're the only thing that is. Now, that, of course, when you ask for the explanations, why? Well, the first explanation probably is religious. In all of our religious traditions, except for the Eastern traditions, Hinduism, etc., basically, human beings, man, as it's called in the Old Testament of the Bible, is all alone. We're it. We're the cat's meow. We're the top of the totem pole. We're the apex of Darwinian evolution. We're whatever supreme position you want to put the human race in, Rex. That's where officials and the mainstream and academia and religious authorities and everybody else has put us. So any evidence against that, basically shattering that paradigm, telling everyone at some point on the planet who reads their religious texts that the most fundamental part of those texts, that we're alone, is wrong. Start right there. That, I think, is the fulcrum. That's the reason we have been systematically lied to on this data for decades.
And that definitely makes the most logical sense, in my opinion. I remember several years ago, a long time ago, back in the 90s, when the Phoenix Lights happened, and then there was the official report about what happened, and they, a lot of people in the audience thought they were actually going to come out with disclosure, but then they put on that fake alien mask and mocked it, like what you're talking about. So, yeah, they've been doing that for forever. And
well, do you remember that it was the governor that sponsored that press conference where the fake alien came out and they took his helmet off and everybody laughed? And it was a systematic government effort started by the governor of Arizona that night to cover up.
Well, and didn't he even see something? Didn't he actually come out before?
Very good, Rex. I was going to get to that. It turns out, decades later, he admitted on a national news show, I forget which, I think it was Larry King. I think Larry King interviewed him. He admitted that very evening he had seen the same damn thing and had been stunned by it, and then had to come out the next day at a press conference and pretend nothing had happened. What he had seen in the sky, an object, a delta-winged craft that, was like half a mile wide or something. I mean,
right.
Astonishing, hovering, floating on anti-gravity across the Sun Valley over Phoenix. And the governor of the state simply could not look at a TV camera and say, I saw something amazing. We need to find out what it is. So is there a cover-up? Of course there's a cover-up. Why is there a cover-up? I think it goes back to the fundamental religious tenets that we've all been taught in the Western world, that we're it.
Now, the Star Wars movie that came out in '77, it portrays the Death Star, and it looks just like Iapetus. It looks very similar to Mimas and Deimos, and these are these moons that orbit the outer rings of Saturn. And I'm thinking to myself, is it just a coincidence, or was there previous knowledge and this is like a way to, subconsciously bring it out to the masses? What's your take on that?
I think George Lucas is an insider. I think Star Wars is our real history. Let me repeat that. I think Star Wars is our real ancient galactic history, and everything else is fake. Everything else is made up. Everything else is just academia feeding us a line because we cannot, for all kinds of reasons, know the truth. And the reason that I think George Lucas is on the inside is because when you start comparing the data we're putting together on the solar system, the extraordinary high-tech civilization that once was here before us, the major modifications, not just of the surfaces of various planets, but the actual rearranging of planets, redesigning the system, moving planets. I mean, that takes major understanding of gravity and inertia and all that. So torsion field physics, we now know, based on separate experimentation that started in the old Soviet Union back even before the Cold War ended, we now know that such a physics is real, that it exists, that it can create phenomenon, that it can be developed into technology, that you can basically create torsion field technologies to remove gravity and change inertia and move across space and find energy from beyond this dimension, etc. So given that incredible technological foundation, the idea that someone before us long ago rearranged everything that we're looking at becomes a little less, hard to swallow. So when I found during the Cassini mission in 2004 that the Cassini spacecraft had gone by one of these moons of Saturn and had relayed back pictures that showed that this moon, Iapetus, which was the star, by the way, of Arthur C. Clarke's, famous 2001: A Space Odyssey, in the novels, in his novels, it was Saturn and Iapetus where the bizarre Stargate and the keys to a high-tech, previous technological presence in the solar system, et cetera, was parked, was basically sequestered. So when I'm looking at the actual real images from NASA of Iapetus in the late winter, early spring of 2004, 2005, in those few days around the turn of the year, what I was stunned by was that the images of Iapetus not only looked geometric, but in fact at some angles, some light, and some images taken, days into the sequence, it actually did look like the Death Star in Star Wars. So, big picture, I think NASA is quietly assembling data to basically document all over the solar system, including its recent visits to asteroids and comets and little tiny objects we normally wouldn't think of as part of, by remote control, by remote sensing, the ancient history of this planet. And somehow George Lucas got access to something, and he's created a series now, which is it's historic. It's basically iconic that we kind of tend to think of, history out there in the universe and in the galaxy, at least, in terms of that model, even if we don't think it's real. Well, folks, I think large portions of what Lucas put together is in fact incredibly distorted, remade, amplified, extended, modified history. And when we finally find the libraries out there, including those somewhere in Iapetus, we're going to find out that this is reality.
So let's talk about the Iapetus possibility of it being a artificial moon, like the whole thing, and the way that it was constructed. If you go to your website, enterprisemission.com, there's a section on there that breaks down your theory on how you feel it was built with, and correct me if I'm wrong here, basically a tetrahedron truss type technology.
Yeah, basically, if you go to Enterprise, you look for, search in Google or wherever, if you want to go there first, Arthur C. Clarke, Moon with a View. That's the name of the series. It's a 5-part series on Iapetus. And what I do is I start with the imagery and I proceed methodically to analyze the images, to analyze the light effects, to analyze comparisons, to analyze, composites with star backgrounds to show us this 3D geometry. Iapetus seems to be, Rex, a 900-mile wide artificial planetoid. Now, if you think that that's impossible, then you haven't looked too deeply into the physics and the technology of doing things like this. But all I would do is to refer you and your audience to the works of people like Freeman Dyson, who was a very noted astrophysicist, worked for decades at Princeton. I think he's still with us. Anyway, Freeman Dyson basically wrote a paper several decades ago about an artificial society building a construct that would completely envelop their star. This was a physics projection, a physical model of what civilizations someday would do when they were threatened with the ultimate, energy crisis. The idea was to harness the energy of their entire star, and to do that, they would have to put space habitats into orbit around their star, and to do that, they would have to deconstruct the planets of that star to turn the planetary material into habitat material, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's where the idea that star systems can be reorganized and rearranged came from in mainstream science. The only problem is people have now not put together yet what Dyson predicted might happen somewhere in the galaxy with what NASA is now confirming with every additional image that they send back is in fact happened here in this solar system, except we haven't englobed the sun. The artificial rearrangements were to the planetary objects that are in the orbit plane, in the so-called equatorial plane of the solar system. And so whatever was going on here was interrupted before it could be completed in terms of Dyson's model, I guess.
Do you think it was like a solar war similar to Star Wars? Or do you think it was like
that's a very interesting question. I have always felt that the reason that this whole thing fell apart is because of a huge civil war, an enormous civil war. There are some indications now from new data, particularly from the New Horizons mission to Pluto, that maybe we are looking at potential invasion as well as a civil war. You know, there's nothing that says that you can't have both, right? You could have two guys going at it, and then the third party joins the fray to take the side of one of the antagonists to basically defeat the other to get something. So again, until we find the libraries, and we know because technological civilizations have to have libraries in order to function, we know someday out there, somewhere, we're going to find the libraries, plural, because any sufficiently advanced technology not only is like magic, but also has to be distributed. It has to be redundant if it's to survive. So like the internet, where if you kill a part of the internet, it doesn't matter. You simply go to another computer, log on, and bingo, there's all your data. I think that the information system, the ancient information system that held the solar system together when this Type 2 civilization was running things, I think that there will be an incredible distributed set of nodes to an kind of a solar system internet, if you will, and that once we find a working node, we'll be able to tap into this library of incredible information going back to how when the solar system was rearranged and who did it and where they came from and their history and the history of them before that and before that. In other words, once we tap into that library system, wherever we find parts of it that are still working, still intact, we're going to be privy to an extraordinary avalanche of information that is going to completely, totally revamp our entire history, our entire vision of science and religion and spirituality and what we are doing here in material bodies, when the reality is the consciousness seems to exist outside of material implementation.
Right.
And all of that is going to not inundate the human species until the ultimate authority figure, which will be an ET civilization that was here before us, is made known. And in fact, in some senses, it's probably good that we have to still reach and strive to get that data, because if we already had it now, the possibility is that the information and the reality is so overwhelming that even scientists will say, what's the point? Why should I bother to study anything? It's all been learned, and it's in this galactic library of which there's a node in the solar system. And so why bother to continue? I mean, that's an obvious, worst case projection.
Sure.
That comes off Margaret Mead. Margaret Mead was an anthropologist back in the 1950s who basically wrote that if we ever found extraterrestrials, we should never let anybody else know, because it would kill the spirit of our civilization, of humanity. It would keep us down. It would basically make scientists think that there was nothing left to find. And Margaret Mead's voice became preeminent in a NASA document that we've now unearthed from the 1960s, from the early 60s, which basically said, and I'm going to paraphrase now, if we find them, we have to hide them because the human race can't stand them, can't survive them, can't persist beyond them because we will be too demoralized. That was Margaret Mead's position, and that became NASA policy in this document called the Brookings Report. And I think that is the documentary basis for the cover-up that's gone on for decades, because the officials, the folks in government, the folks that have been briefed on this, all think that we will collapse and we will lie down and do nothing if we find that we're not the first, that we're not the smartest, we're not the best, and in fact that we are heirs to a legacy which is fantabulous beyond this planet.
That's unfortunate. I wonder if
Of course it is. It's awful. It's their projection. I don't think
Right.
that's what would happen at all. But again, we're at the hands, Rex, of people who are in authority who can control the access to the information. They
Right.
control the propaganda spin machine and all the networks and all over the internet. They basically can keep us thinking we're all alone, even though the reality, the data, is telling us exactly the opposite.
Well, and even as a little boy growing up, I always felt like there was something more to what I was being told. I've always been fascinated with Mars. Many years ago, I saw those photographs from the Viking orbiter, and that shows what looks like a civilization, an old civilization, and a giant face of like a sphinx. And I talked to people about that many years ago, and they kind of laughed it off. But it's really unfortunate because it's almost like the opposite, in my opinion, would happen if disclosure was in full force. The people would be excited and embrace that and look for something. We do have these abilities to get off of fossil fuels and travel the stars like Silver Surfer and experience this like it's in our own planet. So, but and that's a whole other topic and a whole other subject. But I think you're absolutely right when you say religion has probably one of the biggest influences in that, and maybe it would break this, I don't know, I don't want to say soul, but maybe it would break people's hearts in the sense where they would feel that way. I don't know. There's a lot of sheep out there, but people are waking up every day. And that's what I love about what you do. And with the pictures that you've put together, and I'd like to jump back to Iapetus here because it looks like, and in my opinion, I'm trying to figure out why there would be a 20-mile high and a 20-mile wide tower almost, or something that comes up 20 miles high, 20 miles wide, and it goes around the entire circumference of this planetoid. And then I think of CERN.
Oh, are you talking about the equatorial ridge on
Yes,
Iapetus?
exactly. I mean, is it like CERN related? Do you think it's something?
Well, hang on. If I remember my numbers, it's about 60,000 feet high, I think.
Okay.
Which, if you divide 60,000 by 5,920, what do you get? 12? It's about 12 miles high, I think.
Okay. So, and thanks for correcting me on that.
And the reason it's so wide is because it's slumped. It's basically in ruin. It's basically been incredibly eroded. It's been bombarded by everything else in the solar system that went to hell in a handbasket when the war took place and a planet was destroyed. Did we forget to mention that little detail?
Are you talking about the asteroid belt?
Yeah. And so when you look at Iapetus is the worst for wear from being bombarded by a huge amount of material from the exploded planet in the asteroid belt back during, as I'm now beginning to think about it, the Great War. And when you think about this huge civil war that basically pitted planetary busting weapons against each side, it's kind of astonishing that the solar system survived in as good a condition as it is. I mean, the fact is we were finding all kinds of things. It's not hard to find things out there. It's obviously impossible for NASA to tell us politically it's finding things. And that's why we're at a stalemate until there's some kind of breakthrough.
Right. And also, I'm wondering what you think Iapetus was built for. Do you think it was built as a weapon or a warehouse?
I'm beginning to think that Iapetus and maybe Pluto are two artificial objects. I mean, Pluto's 1,500 miles across. But again, with this kind of technology, you can redesign planets, so that's no big deal. It's orbited by 5 objects. They're called moons, but they're not. One of them actually looks, if you look at the color photographs of one of the moons of Pluto, and I'll give you a web link in a minute so you can actually see this stuff. It looks like a flying planetary arcology in interplanetary orbit. It looks like one of the final acts of this civilization was to put one of their big flying cities, glass cities, roughly 12 miles, in diameter and maybe 4 or 5 miles high, into orbit around Pluto, again, as a message, as a, this is what we were, this is who we were, this is what we have saved for you, come and find it. Those two places, Pluto and Iapetus, almost appear to be, I don't know, massive ships, massive vehicles, massive craft, and maybe they're the vehicles and craft that the original inhabitants used to come to this solar system before they redesigned it.
Okay. And also, what's your take on remote viewing?
Remote viewing. Well,
and there's a reason I'm asking that.
Okay, I know. On good look, I think remote viewing depends on the individual. I think it depends on talent. I think it depends on like any other creative endeavor. It all depends on the individual.
Okay.
I think some individuals can be trusted, and others can't, just because the signal to noise ratio is too low.
Sure.
The art form, of course, is figuring out which guys can be trusted and which guys can't.
Absolutely, with anything, and I agree 100%. I've interviewed data,
but I don't discount it. That was my point.
Sure.
I think remote viewing in certain circumstances can give us accurate pictures. Yes.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And the reason I'm asking that is because I've interviewed Courtney Brown and Dick Allgaier on their remote viewing sessions that they did on Iapetus. It's funny, I interviewed Courtney probably, 4 or 5 years ago after I discovered your work, and I told him during the interview, I said, man, you should remote view Iapetus. And he never said anything about it. And then several years later, he comes out with their findings on Iapetus, and he's never admitted that I gave him that idea. But
I'm totally unaware of this. So Courtney Brown, for folks that may not remember, is the remote viewer guy, scientist, who got in deep trouble along with Art Bell.
Yeah.
When they remote viewed Comet Hale-Bopp and that whole, disaster, total disaster, and then the death of those 39 Heaven's Gate people in what were they, San Diego, down around?
Yes, Heaven's Gate, that cult that basically thought that they were going to kill themselves and fly off.
I also thought it was very ironic that 39 of them killed themselves, and 39, of course, is twice 19.5. So what did they know?
Very odd. They claim that they thought, and they remote viewed Iapetus, and the findings that
this is Courtney.
Well, Courtney doesn't do the remote viewing now. He's just a director for the Farsight Institute. There's Dick Allgaier and Daz Smith. These are the two individuals that did the sessions. They're probably two of the best remote viewers out there right now, or in the top 5 in the world. And
so when do they do sessions on Iapetus?
They did multiple sessions on Iapetus, actually. I think it was last year sometime. They came out with their findings.
Okay, hang on. So it's last year.
Mm-hmm.
We published this 5-part series on Iapetus based on the Cassini imagery and data.
Right.
Back in 2005.
Uh-huh.
So
yes,
we're
many years ago.
Like 10 years, between our work and theirs. So what did they find?
Well, they came back with it being what they found was like an art. They think it was like some type of resort, some type of structure that was built by somebody similar to maybe Elon Musk back in the day that had all the money and resources and just very eclectic. And they think it was a resort that was built there, most likely because of the view that it has, as well as possibly healing properties. But they don't think it was used for any type of war or anything. So very interesting.
Okay, this is where we really have to discuss this, because that idea, that model, is in my original posting in that series of 5 articles on Enterprise Mission. I talk about the resort. I talk about Moon with a View. I talk about leveraging that because it's in a very high angle. I believe the orbit of Iapetus is 15 degrees to the mid-plane of the orbits of the other Saturnian moons. So you would have this incredible view. You would also go up and down through that ring plane like Pluto goes up and down through the central plane of the solar system. So it would keep you out of debris if there was debris in that, central ring plane of Saturn. But again, I'm a little bit disappointed because they haven't surprised us, Rex, with anything. They're basically simply taking my model published a decade before, and they're saying that's what they get from the remote viewing. Now, it's all very possible that I was so stunningly prescient in my analysis that I hit it right 10 years ago or 15 years ago.
Right.
And that they simply reaffirmed and confirmed. But the problem with remote viewing is we won't know until we go there and find the damn libraries and find out what's inside, will we?
You're absolutely right. Absolutely. And I appreciate that. And it's kind of neat to hear what you're saying, because if you believe those guys that did this, you can watch them live while they do these sessions. And if you believe what they're saying, it just correlates with what you say. It backs it up. And I think that's awesome. Very impressive.
Well, again, I don't want to jump to the conclusion that they've confirmed our model, because we don't have confirmation of either investigation approach, and we won't until we send robots to Iapetus, to find the doorways, to get inside and find the working libraries. Now, what are the odds that we're going to find working libraries? Well, we happen to know that if you take away the atmosphere and you hide stuff under shielding, you can protect it from radiation, you can protect it from oxidation, you can protect it that way from meteor bombardment, from, basically sandblasting, which means in the center or near the center of a 900-mile wide object, say that real fast 3 times, you will probably find existing structures, working electronics, all the things we would need to basically get the libraries there working again, to find out what the real history is. So this is not a fool's errand. What I'm proposing is that if we aggressively created a real space program and developed the real technologies to go and ask the right questions of the objects still surviving in the system, we could easily, within the next 10, 20 years, get the real history. But the question seems to be, does anyone in power here on Earth really want the rest of us to know that everything we think we know about our own history and the history of the solar system is wrong?
Right. Yeah, hopefully some big names, maybe, Elon Musk, man. Maybe this guy will come out with something cool. I know they're working on the space program, trying to privatize it. And if enough smart people out there get together, from college or whatever.
See, the cool thing about Elon Musk is that if he completes the development cycles on the new technology, the relandable first stage of the Falcon 9 rocket, and then ultimately that he wants to make the second and the third stage of a 3-stage rocket also recoverable.
Great.
That means that instead of throwing a rocket away, which is the price equivalent of a Boeing 747, you basically reuse the same vehicle again and again and again, which means, let's say the Enterprise mission wanted to send a probe to Iapetus to find the libraries, right? Right now, it cost us hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, if Elon Musk succeeds, he has said that he is able to now project in the numbers that he can reduce the cost of the rocket technology to get spacecraft into space by a factor of between 10 and 100. Now, your average mission now costs around $100 million, right? Suppose he reduces the cost down to $1 million. You can raise $1 million on Kickstarter. Right. You can raise $1 million in the private equity markets. You can raise $1 million, particularly if you show them data that if they pay for this and put the spacecraft together, which is off the shelf because there's all kinds of technology, you just buy it from the companies that are making it, whether it be Boeing or SpaceX or Ariane or any of the other companies. All that stuff exists. It's just priced out of the normal market. If Elon Musk can drive the market price down by a factor of 100, it means that all kinds of private robotic expeditions, Rex, could be launched from this planet, could fan out across the whole solar system, not just Iapetus, return us real data, real information, real ground truth from rovers that we would build. In other words, we're on the threshold, maybe, just in terms of conventional chemical-based rocket technology. We're on the threshold of maybe a stunning revolution in how we, how during the political campaign, all the candidates are talking about taking back America, taking back our government and all that. Maybe we could take back our space program and really find out what's out there. And that, of course, would transform the Earth.
Oh, it'd be incredible. And, hopefully that's the next step. It certainly seems like more information is available to people, and hopefully we'll be able to use this to our advantage. But, also I'm thinking about, I want to jump maybe to Phobos now. When in the 1960s, I think it was Dr. Fred Singer, he was an advisor to the Eisenhower guys, and basically he said that Phobos is artificial. And I know that you've got a lot of information on that. I was wondering what you could share with us.
Well, first of all, I'm very impressed with the perspicacity of your questions. You have definitely done your homework, Rex. I got to give you, a gold star for that.
Thank you very much.
Nobody knows about Fred Singer. Fred Singer was a geologist who, as you said, was one of the advisors to the Eisenhower administration. And he proposed, basically, because none of the other models fit, that based on the Sharpless data, there was an astronomer at Lowell Observatory called Sharpless who had measured the rotation around Mars of the inner moon Phobos. And what he found, looking at like 100 years of data from when Asaph Hall discovered Phobos in 1877, in the summer of 1877, to basically now, in the 1950s, Singer looked at Sharpless data. Sharpless data said that Phobos was not proceeding in a very nice methodical orbit around Mars, but in fact was accelerating. Now, what does accelerating mean in spaceflight terms? It means that Phobos was moving faster and faster. Well, and we're talking not, miles per second, we're talking feet per second, which over years adds up to a difference between where it would have been and where you actually photograph it. So what would cause Phobos to basically be moving faster around Mars? It would only move faster in terms of normal Newtonian, Keplerian celestial mechanics if somehow Phobos' orbit was changing, and Phobos' orbit could only be changed if the Martian atmosphere was somehow slowing it down, even at that height of 6,000 miles above the planet. And that could only happen if Phobos was incredibly light, like styrofoam, as opposed to rock. Phobos is a body roughly 15 miles across. It's shaped like a potato, so it's longer in one axis and in the other axis than in the third axis. So it's a misshapen potato orbiting Mars roughly 6,000 miles above it, keeps one face toward Mars, one face away, just like our moon, because it's in what's called a tidal lock. And yet it seemed to be accelerating. And the only way that could be explained, both by Sharpless, who was the astronomer here at Lowell, as well as a Russian astrophysicist named Shklovsky in the 1950s, was if, in fact, the Martian atmosphere was basically pulling it down. Like Earth satellites, they re-enter because of friction with the Earth's atmosphere, right?
Right.
Okay, so think of Phobos as a huge, huge, huge artificial satellite, which is basically like a balloon. It's 15 miles wide, but there's almost nothing inside, so its mass is very, 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 very low. So the very low density of the Martian atmosphere at 6,000 miles, again, this is all 1950s calculations, could provide enough drag to cause it to spiral in very slightly toward Mars every orbit, and that gave you the acceleration. Okay, that's the state of the art when we left the Phobos mystery, when Shklovsky and Carl Sagan, remember, Carl Sagan and Shklovsky did a book together, right?
Right.
And the Phobos as an artificial object was a major part of that book, right? So then the background goes silent until we get to the Russian missions, Phobos 1 and 2, that go to Mars in 1988 and try to go into orbit around Phobos and die. The spacecraft disappears.
Yeah.
Suddenly, all information is lost. The signal is lost. The last picture that comes back shows this big, kind of long, cylinder-shaped object in space in front of the spacecraft in the vicinity of Phobos, and then no more information. So then we fast forward the film to the NASA missions, particularly the earlier. I'm kind of getting this out of sequence because our Viking mission went to Mars in 76. The Russians went to try to go to Phobos in 88. Our Viking mission photographed Phobos from afar, from orbit, in 76, 77. Sagan made a big deal about those pictures, got them taken. NASA apparently hadn't even planned to take pictures of the Martian moons, which I frankly find, Rex, unbelievable. I think
it's ridiculous.
Of course, you go to a new planet and you don't photograph the moons. I think that's part of a window into the conversations behind the scenes between Sagan and the NASA officials regarding what the nature of Phobos really was, and the unwillingness to put out the imagery in public until they had been vetted, until they made sure there were no obviously artificial installations on the surface of this knobby, potato-shaped object circling Mars every 7 hours. So, bottom line, we now get to the HiRISE mission, which is a super-duper telescope that we put into orbit around Mars, kind of like Hubble in Mars orbit, but looking down at Mars. And they're taking photographs of objects on the surface of Mars that are on the order of a few inches across. Well, the HiRISE people turned the camera toward Phobos a few years ago and took stunning color photographs of Phobos. And on those photographs, you can see all kinds of geometric alignments, like a checkerboard, like a tic-tac-toe game, where you have things arranged at right angles, lines, different colors, aluminum kind of like sheen, reflection compared to brown oxidized dirt or whatever. And then we got the Mars Express images, which came much closer in the last few years. The Mars Express mission was sent by the Europeans to Mars back in 2003, and eventually they got enough confidence in maneuvering and controlling the spacecraft. Again, this is all done by remote control. You send radio signals, you hope the computer interprets them right, you fire the rockets in the right direction, and the spacecraft changes position. And so it takes a little while to kind of get good at that, particularly when you're dealing with gravitational fields that aren't uniform. So toward the end years of the Mars Express mission, the Europeans got ballsy enough, can I say that on radio? I guess I can, to basically tweak the orbit of Mars Express to where it came within like 10 miles of Phobos. Now, if they'd made a miscalculation in their orbits, they could have smacked into Phobos. A, that's the end of the mission, and B, what happens to Phobos if you do that? You don't want to do that. So they had to really, really, really be sure that they could tweak the orbit of Mars Express so that it would pass near Phobos, but it wouldn't hit Phobos, and they were successful. And they were able then to do very sophisticated analyses, Rex, of what's inside Phobos. They didn't use remote viewing. What they did is they watched the trajectory change of the Mars Express spacecraft as it went past within like 10 miles of this 15-mile diameter little knobby potato, right? And then they watched how the trajectory changed. And the implication was any trajectory changes will be caused by the gravity field of Phobos, okay? And even more interesting, they felt they would be able to pull out of that data whether Phobos was, in fact, as we said before, a big hollow balloon with nothing inside it, or in fact it was more dense and it had cavities or voids or big spaces inside it. And lo and behold, based on the gravity tracking data just a year or two ago from Mars Express, the Europeans announced that Phobos, the little 15-mile wide Phobos, potato-shaped, full of craters, dark, very dark, like one of the blackest objects in the solar system. It's blacker than coal, blacker than carbon. It's like 4 or 5% reflectivity. It appears to be a solid object with big voids inside, big gaps, big holes, big caverns under a crust, which of course has got holes in it too because of cratering. In other words, Phobos is not a solid object, but it appears to have, Rex, all kinds of interior volumes in which you could house things, people, agriculture, productivity, factories, farming, atmospheric generation. In other words, Phobos is not a rock. Phobos is something much more exciting, which then was confirmed by the radio signals they were able to send through Phobos and to receive and to analyze the interior electromagnetically. So we've got two separate data points that say Phobos is not a solid object. It's got hollows inside, and it is not anywhere near as massive as we would think. And there's no real natural mechanism that anybody can think of to create an object like Phobos in Mars orbit with those internal parameters. So that data moves us closer to the idea that, yeah, Phobos really is another big blankety blank spaceship.
Well, and then let's get into the possibility. You bring up that, those several satellites by the Russians that were sent out there that disappeared, no contact back.
Yeah,
And,
that was Phobos 1 and 2.
and then you've got, the rings of Saturn and those incredible planetoids that orbit that look like a bunch of Death Stars. And they've got that book.
You mean the real little guys?
Yeah, and then there was that book that came out called many years ago called the Ring Makers of Saturn, and there's pictures of these giant cylinder-looking things that look very similar to what was last seen from the satellite sent out to look at Phobos. I'm wondering if they're one and the same, and I'm wondering if there's possibly still people in that in Phobos, and it's being protected by that ship.
Well, see, now this is the interesting question. First of all, whatever was it left the air before it disappeared cannot be a spaceship as we define spaceships. You know why? It's too
Physics?
dark. Physics. It's too dark. Optically, it's too dark. In fact, Tom Van Flandern, before he died, he was a friend of mine. He was the chief celestial mechanics expert at the U.S. Naval Observatory in Washington, D.C. He was the scientist who had basically first proposed the idea that there had been a massive planetary catastrophe, a destruction of a whole planet in the solar system not too long ago, 65 million years ago, or in that neighborhood thereabouts. So what Tom did was to analyze, based on that last Russian picture from Phobos, the mysterious cylindrical object. And his conclusion was, based on photometry, which is measurement of light, the brightness of light, that in fact, remember how I said a moment ago that Phobos was very, very dark? It was like 5% reflectivity. It was blacker than coal. The object that the Phobos spacecraft photographed near Phobos, this cylindrical object, turned out to be a time-lapse image of a streak of light by an object near the spacecraft, but the object was not a cylinder. It was basically a time lapse of a much smaller circular object moving across the field of view of the camera when the shutter was open. That's number one. So it wasn't a cylinder. It was actually maybe a fist-sized lump of rock. Number two, and more important, if it was a spacecraft, it would be bright and shiny, right? In fact, the photometrics of the object that was photographed around Phobos turns out to be very dark. It's a very dark, non-reflective object. In fact, the reflectivity of the mysterious object around Phobos was about as dark as Phobos itself. So that implies that it may have been a rock. It may have been something spalled up by an impact on Phobos, still orbiting Mars along with Phobos, which is how the celestial mechanics work. And basically there was a cloud of smaller objects. And as the Phobos Russian spacecraft approached the moon Phobos, it was one of these smaller debris fields of objects kind of floating in orbit with Phobos that killed the spacecraft because it ran into a rock.
Okay. Well,
so there's nobody home. I really want to emphasize, as far as I can tell from all the data that we have looked at, from all the missions, all the planetary surfaces, all the artifacts, all the ruins, all the anomalies we found no evidence of anybody except us, the human race, alive in the solar system now. It all appears to be an ancient, preserved ruin waiting for us to reach out and find out who we really finally are.
Now, a lot of the abduction cases that go on these days and cattle mutilations and such, do you think that that's possibly our own government and a lot of made-up stuff? I mean, do you think that there is some type of contact with an extraterrestrial race now, or you think that there hasn't been? Like you're saying, it's all just, for thousands of years, maybe millions of years, there has been none.
I think it's us. I mean, I've done a lot of work on the abductees, particularly. I don't talk about a lot of this in public because it's not really part of what we were doing, but it's foreshadowing of what we're doing. I'm trying to do extraterrestrial archaeology, and I say often that we don't do UFOs. But I have come in contact over the years with lots of people who have been abducted and who have described the experience, and some of them now believe firmly that it was military, it was black ops, it was intelligence, it was, in other words, human beings masquerading as, bad aliens, to basically keep this wall of imprisonment between us and whatever is going on out there. I mean, suppose real extraterrestrials came to Earth and they landed and they tried to interact with someone. Do you think that anybody in their right mind would run gleefully toward a landed spaceship, given all the horrors that we've been told about from abductions and UFOs and ETs and Whitley Strieber and communion and all of that mythology, which factors into now how people view the sky and view extraterrestrials? In other words, I think the abductions are part of a technique to drive wedges and keep human beings in subjection, to keep us terrified and afraid of whoever's out there, and also to spread propaganda that whatever's out there is so bad we have to basically depend on our own officials to protect us, which again is part of the ongoing mythos that government knows what to do and the rest of us don't.
Right. Right. And it's interesting you bring that up as far as the persona of aliens today. Back in the 80s, there was E.T., Alf, all these happy aliens. And nowadays it's Cloverfield and Independence Day. And, it's interesting. But yeah, let's get back into more of these just amazing anomalies, Richard, like Cydonia. I know that you've got just a ton of information on that. And these pictures that were taken from the Viking orbiter and other satellites from NASA, possibly JPL. And then now you've got rovers on Mars. But Cydonia specifically, I want to talk about it first because everybody's heard of Cydonia that studies Mars and anomalies. And there's these what looks like pyramids and buildings to the I guess you could say southwest of this famous or infamous Sphinx face. So I was wondering what you could tell us about that and some of the geometrical patterns and numerology associated with these.
Well, as I said in Monuments, remember I've written 2 books, Monuments of Mars, A City on the Edge of Forever, which is our description of the Mars discoveries up to and including things that I found on the moon in the latter years as I was looking at Mars. And then the other book, Dark Mission, is a subsequent book which talks about more recent history. So back when I wrote Monuments of Mars, I was basically working off the Viking data, and the Viking data gave us 2 sets of images of this region on Mars called Cydonia, taken about a month apart, and I go through in elaborate detail in the early chapters of the Monuments of Mars, the discovery, my being at JPL, the questions that were asked, the dismissals, that it was anything interesting but a trick of light and shadow. I then talk about how I went to a conference in Boulder, Colorado, some years later, a science conference, and saw 2 engineering contractors, imaging contractors from, I believe, Lockheed, who had independently gone into the Goddard Space Flight Center files, had found the pictures of Mars, found the pictures of Cydonia, had found a second face, a second image of the face on Mars, as I said, taken 30 days after the first image that had been dismissed at this press conference at JPL. And so, as Sherlock Holmes would say, the game's afoot. So now you've got 2 separate images of this face, right? With one, it could be, as NASA says resolutely for decades, just a trick of light and shadow. But when you got 2 pictures and they're taken at 2 different sun angles and you compare them scientifically, point for point and feature for feature, and they turn out to be the same. And then when you have one of your colleagues, which I did, Mark Carlotto, do a 3-dimensional shape from shading, full 360 rotation of the face, and you find that it is in fact a 3-dimensional 1,500-foot high, mile-wide image of a human being lying on Mars, which is how I got into all this. You say to yourself, wait a minute, according to all existing science, that's impossible. A, nobody can live on Mars because NASA's now found that it's dead and died a long time ago. And
do you think that's true? Do you think they're being honest about that?
No, but that's only one of the many, many, many lies we've been told. Remember, if the name of the game is to keep us down on the farm, to keep us isolated on one planet, to keep us thinking this is all there is, then all the information coming from out there has been filtered. It has been skewed to where we're only going to see the natural stuff. We're not going to see any of the artificial stuff. So that's what made the face on Mars such an anomaly, because not only did we have one photograph that NASA grudgingly told us about and said, oh, it's just a trick of light and shadow. In fact, the project scientist, Jerry Soffman, told us flatly that morning in 1976, I think it was July 25th or something of 76 when they showed us that face. He said categorically, when we took a picture a few hours later, it all went away. Now, it turns out that was a absolute bold-faced lie. Why was it a lie? Because you couldn't take a picture of the face on Mars with the Viking spacecraft a few hours later.
Right.
The orbits and the celestial mechanics and all that made that impossible. The actual second picture that was taken, which Molinar and DiPietro found, as I said, the engineers working for Lockheed at Goddard, separately, years later, found that there was a second picture, but it wasn't taken a few hours later. It was taken a month later when the orbits resynchronized, and more critically, it was taken at a different sun angle. Now, it's the sun angle that determines whether you're looking at a trick of light and shadow. When you have two separate images at two different sun angles, with computer technology now, you can put together an exquisite 3D model, which is what Dr. Carlotto did as part of our early science in this area. And it's that separate image which creates the 3D model that allows us to say categorically the face on Mars was not, is not, cannot be a trick of light and shadow. It's a real three-dimensional structure with that morphology, that geometry, that appearance, and obviously somebody made it because of the symmetries in the internal geometry, and they made it in our likeness, and that's, of course, telling us something huge. And then, of course, I go on for a presentation at the UN to find that the face on Mars actually is two faces. The left-hand side is humanoid or anthropoid or looks something like us, probably a much more primitive us. The right-hand side, when you look at the face on Mars from the Viking images, looks like a lion, a feline image, a total non-primate. So what you've got in the face on Mars is a fusion of two artistic images, and one is hominid and one is feline, and there's got to be a reason why the incredible artists who created this, with engineering that's totally beyond us, of course, why that message was intended to last down through time. What could whoever built the city at Cydonia and the face on Mars have been intending by communicating a message of the fusion of a hominid species and a feline species? That, to me, is an overwhelming question yet to be answered and satisfied.
Well, and it sounds like the Sphinx in Egypt, they merged the two.
Exactly.
There's some spiritual or metaphysical connection there, some symbologically speaking.
Wait. Why would you say metaphysical or spiritual?
Hey,
To me, when you see two species fused together, it says genetic engineering.
There you go. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we've got a feline genes and we've got hominid genes, and someone in the model of the face on Mars is to tell us this. Someone fused these two genes together to create a third species. Now, that's an astonishing message, if that's the message we should be reading. So then you go to a very obscure, totally obscure piece of popular trivia in the 1950s here on Earth, which is a Viewmaster reel put together by producers in Hollywood with the help of a German science writer, German space writer named Willy Ley. In the 1950s, early 51, Willy Ley was part of a project to do the pilot for the Saturday morning TV show. I forget whether it was on CBS or ABC, Tom Corbett Space Cadet. And in this Viewmaster reel, which was a kind of a pilot for the Tom Corbett Space Cadet TV series, which was in black and white, of course, in this color Viewmaster reel, you see very clearly Tom Corbett goes to Mars, finds an ancient civilization marked by a feline head. It then directs him to the asteroid belt. He then takes his crew to the asteroid belt. They go inside an asteroid kind of looking like Phobos, and they find the remains of an ancient super civilization. And the civilization was basically run by, created by, organized by, and utilized by, benefited by an alien race of giant, wait for it, pussycats. Huge feline alien beings. 1951, Tom Corbett Space Cadet. 1976, Viking photographs huge feline hominid face on Mars. Rex, do you think someone knows something that the rest of us don't know, and they've been trying to tell us for a long, long time?
Oh, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. And that also makes me think that when this giant catastrophe that caused possibly an entire solar system or even beyond that to almost be completely destroyed where just a few people survived, I'll bet you that there was a break-off society even back then, in my opinion, and they're who knows where they are now. Maybe they're in a completely different dimension. Maybe, I don't know. But I wonder, and I think that there's...
But Rex,
yeah.
the thing is we can find out. All
That's
we have
the
to do is
beauty.
go and find the libraries.
Yeah, right.
You know, when you try to reconstruct solar system history, you try to reconstruct terrestrial history, you know, beyond a few thousand years, you're basically back to rocks, right? You're reconstructing the history of the planet based on the rocks, the record in the rocks. In this case, we don't have to wait to decode that record, which is not going to tell us about anything artificial anyway. We can find the libraries. And if this ancient, incredibly advanced civilization was at least as advanced in information technology as we are, and of course, you know I'm being really kind of droll when I say that.
Right.
We know there's going to be vast nodes of electronic connection libraries all over the solar system. All we have to do is find one that's working, and we'll have the entire history of what came before us and who we are and what happened to the solar system all at once, like a huge super mega hit movie, all in one place. All we got to do is find that one place. And NASA may be trying to find that one place with their missions, but they're not telling the rest of us.
Well, and maybe they already have. And like you said...
You mean found it?
Yeah.
Yes, totally. I totally agree. They may have found it. They may have found it in the most incredibly unexpected form. Do you remember me showing some years ago a photograph from the moon, from the Apollo missions, from Apollo 17, of a very remarkable object lying in a crater called Shorty Crater near the Apollo 17 landing site on the moon?
Please refresh my memory.
The robotic head, Data's head, C-3PO.
Oh, yes. And I'm so this is totally, I was just about to ask, this is syncing with what I was about to ask about androids. And I'm wondering if they possibly might have had something to do with this civil war. So sorry.
Okay. Great setup. So let's continue. When Gene Cernan and Harrison Schmitt, two guys, two astronauts landed on the moon on Apollo 17, in December of 1972. They took a rover with them. Remember the big rover, the Boeing, little car, and they drove miles around the valley of Taurus Littrow, picking up rocks and documenting geology and all that. And they visited a crater called Shorty Crater. And they took tons and tons of pictures, and all of those images are now on the official NASA website. So all you have to do is to go and Google Apollo 17 NASA websites, and you'll see thousands of incredible high-resolution color images from the Apollo 17 mission. About a dozen of those images were taken as a panoramic sequence around this Shorty Crater, and in the bottom of the crater, on all of these images, remember I said before we had 2 images of the face on Mars?
Yep.
We have like a dozen images of the head, the robot head in the bottom of Shorty Crater. This object, this feature, which is not a rock, has eyes, eye sockets. It has lens-like geometry inside the eye sockets, looking like they were some kind of, multifaceted telescopic lenses as opposed to, eyeballs. Kind of detail you'd never put on a statue. It also has a very symmetrical C-3PO looking visage. it kind of does look like C-3PO. All right. Now, C-3PO is the anthropoid robot in Star Wars, which takes us back to George Lucas.
Yeah.
Which takes us back to, what does Lucas know? Because there is a real dead, preserved, incredibly interesting C-3PO head on the moon, photographed by the Apollo 17 astronauts. And when you put them together, because you can composite images to build up signal to noise, and we've got a dozen images. So I put a couple together just to see if I could bring up more detail. And yes, we did. And yes, you can find this on the Enterprise Mission website. Just go to enterprisemission.com and just, or you can Google Data's Head Enterprise Mission. It will take you to the article, take you to our analysis, take you to the images, to the comparisons. There appears to have been a real robot head on the moon found by the Apollo astronauts. And we don't know tonight, Rex, whether they brought it home. And if they brought it home, how long did it take for them to wake it up?
Right.
How long did it take for them to be able to tap into its memories? Could it, in fact, have been, given that robotic technology will evolve in this way on Earth, could, in fact, one robot found, if the head is in perfect shape, it hasn't been physically damaged, and you can re-energize it, put electricity back in, that's all you do. Bingo, there you have your node to the intergalactic library of this ancient super high civilization that remodeled this solar system and then died in some incredible tragic catastrophe, which may have been a great war. And now we get to Glenn Larson and we get to Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, yep.
And we get to that perspective on our history. So in fact, are we really a composite of the Star Wars mythos and the Battlestar Galactica mythos? And is C-3PO on the moon, or Data's head on the moon found by Apollo 17, the key to all of this?
Well, and
did we learn in those 40 years since Apollo, did we learn how to talk to it? And is that secretly inside the reason we're seeing lots of interesting changes around the world, including 195 nations all coming together in Paris over so-called climate warming? But in fact, those 195 nations, are they in fact sharing data on a coming revelation of who we really are?
Right. And it's interesting, too, you're bringing up that event in Paris. And just before that event of all the nations gathering together, there was the Bataclan attacks, and just, wow, very strange coincidence there. But so we're talking about possibly, C-3PO type android head on the moon. And I remember seeing that picture. It blew my mind.
And do you remember one of the key factors of the head? What was the thing that really made it obvious that it couldn't be a rock?
Well, it was like the eyeball things. It was like just the shapes of kind of like this multi-dimensional eye socket eyeball thing that I'm thinking of that was very Android-looking.
It had basically iris eyes, like camera eyes, as opposed to organic eyeballs. Who in their right mind, what process, what force can create symmetry and iris-like eyes on a piece of rock on the moon at random?
It's just swamp gas, Richard. But I gotta say too, we're talking about all these similarities of Star Wars, and I just got to plug one more thing. Several years ago, there was some really cool news articles that came out about how some divers found like this spaceship thing in the Caribbean somewhere. It was either the Caribbean or Bahamas, and then it just got real hush hush. Military went out there, they closed everything off, but there was some infrared images.
No, that wasn't what it was. It was Paulina Zalitsky, who was an oceanographer from Canada who got a contract with Fidel Castro to do deep diving off the western coast of Cuba.
Okay, thank you.
And they found this ancient pyramid city a half a mile down on the ocean floor where nothing like that should ever be. And then all news vanished.
Well, what I was referring to, and that's actually something that's awesome too, but there was a few years ago, and I'll double check my reference points here, but they found this like spaceship looking thing on the bottom of the ocean, but it wasn't. They did an infrared photography on it. It looked just like the Millennium Falcon. Literally, it had the same outline.
No. I know what you're talking about. Look, there's so much, Rex. You'll be forgiven for
conflating
the two stories because there's too much to keep track of. That was the object found under the Baltic Sea.
Baltic Sea.
A couple years ago. And you can't do infrared underwater, but they did sonar. They
sonar.
found it with sonar, and it looks like the Millennium Falcon. Yes, geometrically, it looks like the Millennium Falcon. And it even seems to have a kind of a groove across the seabed where whatever came in slid and left a big slosh mark in the sediments on the bottom of the Baltic Sea, very similar to the marks that were left around the Titanic when it splashed into the sediments, back in 1912 after it sank in its maiden voyage. So yeah, there's something unusual under the Baltic Sea, which looks to be anomalous, maybe technological. It looks kind of like maybe a spaceship. We don't know. And again, all news in the news media, all connections, all discussion of that anomaly has disappeared. So let me get back to C3PO on the moon for a moment. The one huge significator which tells me that we're dealing with an artificial object is there's a big red stripe under his chin. What rocks on the moon do you know that have red stripes painted on them under their chin?
Right.
So no. Now, here's the huge question. Did the Apollo 17 astronauts, did Cernan and Schmidt, go down into that crater, pick up C3PO's head, and bring it home? And did it take them 40 years, them meaning NASA, the government, the NSA, every expert on the planet brought to bear on how to decode what was in the computer memory? Did they finally figure out how to, A, turn it on, and B, how to talk to it? And what has it told them? And is that in part a reason for some of the peculiar things going on around the planet geopolitically right now?
Oh, I can certainly imagine the possibilities. That's amazing and incredible to think about. And that also makes me wonder too, remember a few years ago, NASA bomb to the moon.
No. They were thinking of.
Well, they sent a missile out there or something, didn't they, to find water?
No. They're all right. Back in the 1950s and 60s, Sagan was involved in a project to literally, because we were in this rush with the Russians, in this race, and we wanted to basically prove our superiority. There were people in the DoD, in the Defense Department, who actually thought we should send a nuclear, atomic bomb to the moon, detonate it to basically make a statement. Thank God that never happened. But there have been a lot of other spacecraft now in the last few years which have gone into orbit. There's the Lunar Observer, Lunar Orbiter, and what it does is it takes high-resolution images of the entire surface now. So we now know the moon much better than we ever did, but unfortunately, those images have not been published yet. NASA has seen them, and the rest of us haven't.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't a missile. It wasn't a nuclear missile. It was just a satellite they sent in 2009 to kick up some dust to supposedly find water.
If we have a moon, 22,000, 160 miles across, which is the size of the moon, quarter the size of the Earth.
Right.
And it's orbiting a 250,000 miles away, if it's really a gas station, if it's got all kinds of volatiles, all kinds of things we can use to explore and ultimately colonize space, why would you not want to send a spacecraft to inventory its materials? That's what LaCrosse was. The idea was to send a spacecraft to the polar regions, the South Polar region, because given the way the moon orbits the Earth and its angle to the sun, in terms of obliquity, which is, how it spins, is it straight up and down or does it have a tilt? The poles of the moon, there are places on the poles of the moon that never ever now see sunlight, which means they get very, very, very cold, like down almost to absolute zero. It's now been found by the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter mission that the poles of the moon are actually colder, Rex, than Pluto. There are parts of the moon in permanent shadow which are lower in temperature, closer to absolute zero than even the surface of Pluto in sunlight. That's how dramatic it is. When you take away external energy, things in space get very, very, very cold. So the theory was, if you have cold traps, as they're called, at the poles of the moon, North and South Pole, it's possible that you will have trapped water in those cold traps over the history of the solar system, again, looking at a conventional model of the solar system, because we're talking NASA now.
Hey, what's up, guys? Looks like we got a little haze going on now. I'm not sure if that haze is going to clear or not. The wind's coming off the Atlantic with some pop-up thunderstorms and whatnot. Hopefully it'll clear for a little bit. I'm just sitting here texting Paul. We don't have a very good look from where he's at of how the weather is, but at least we got this. At least the thick clouds somewhat moved out. What's up to everybody in the chat? Who do we all got here? Jenny's here. Signs is here. Rick. Mr. Rick Jackson. Rockstar, of course. I'm just going up through the chat here. Jersey's around. That's all for the chatters, pretty much. Rendra. AZ. I think she's still around. Anthony thinks it's a load of turd. It's freaking great. Gotta love it. Yeah, so hopefully it'll clear a little bit yet. We get a good 45 minutes or so. If not, if it stays like this, we might go for another half hour maybe. I can't see us going much longer than that. But you can still see stuff if it crosses. If you happen to see anything, just throw the timestamp up in the chat box. What's up, Bob? Bob Roberto. First time, welcome. Feel free to chat away. Man, that is just really, really cloudy. I'll be popping in and out on here, give you guys updates. To see where we're going with it. It was a lot easier to say it on mic than type it all out. So, yeah. So we're just waiting for some clouds to clear. Hopefully it will. And what's up? At Manson1? At Manson1? Yeah. That's it. But yeah. I'll be back in a couple minutes. And I'm not sure what Hoagland's view is on the lunar wave. But I'm pretty sure you can email him and find out if you want. Alright. I'll be back.
Not a major naturally occurring element. It doesn't exist in abundance in the crust of the Earth and the crust of any other planet. This is such an anomaly that nobody is talking about, but Mercury is a major component of very exotic high technology systems, including, if you read the Indian Vedas and the Indian Vedic traditions going back thousands of years, talking about a previous high-tech civilization on Earth, Mercury was the operative material that made the Vimanas, the anti-gravity spacecraft of this previous high-tech civilization, reported by the Indian Vimanas in their histories, in their chronicles, in their myths, as having existed. And so Mercury is a critical component for any major civilization that wants to go into space. And isn't it incredibly weird that we found as much liquid mercury at the bottom south pole of the moon as we found water? To me, that's telling us something overwhelmingly profound.
Yeah, that's incredible. And it also brings me to the next question. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but many years ago when we had people on the moon and they brought some rocks back, the compound was basically like a titanium alloy mixture. Is that correct? Yeah.
Titanium is incredibly abundant in what are called the mare. When you look at the moon on a full moon night, you see light areas and dark areas. The light areas are very light rocks. They are rich in aluminum. They're rich in silicates. They're rich in magnesium compounds. The dark areas, the so-called seas of the moon, they're rich in iron compounds. They're rich in basalts, which is a very heavy black volcanic rock, which has a lot of iron in it, which comes up out of the earth all over. Hawaii basically is made of basalt. The fact is that there are titanium-rich rocks or titanium-rich samples. We probably should call them samples and not rocks, because they may not be rocks. They may be the end product of the mining and manufacturing, refining manufacturing of titanium for structural use on the moon, and the fact that we're only finding titanium-bearing stuff in the mare and not in the highlands of the moon tells me that maybe the ancient cities on the moon, now totally destroyed because of this, interplanetary war that bombarded every planet with incredible amounts of debris, which would have sandblasted everything into oblivion. The dark areas of the lunar seas might in fact mark the titanium-rich foundations of the ancient vast cities on the moon that we no longer even can see or even envision because they've been so thoroughly destroyed by the after effects of that war.
And also, I had an opportunity to speak with Alan Sturm. He's got a website called Lunar Anomalies. I think you've actually spoken with him before on your radio program, haven't you?
You mean Alan Stern?
All right, we got cleared up pretty good, so we're going to try to go in close again for a little bit and see what we can get. At least for a little bit. And what's up? Man, where do you guys get these names? Jurassic Pork. Once again, what's up at Manson 1? Who else was up in here? I thought I saw some. Bob Smithers. Bob Smithers, welcome. I think that's last ones I've seen on the chat anyway. So yeah, we'll try to go in close and see if we can get in some craters one more time.
For this Pluto special, you go to othersideofmidnight.com, you click on the archive, Club 19.5, that's our archive. In fact, that's where I plan to put this recording of this show at some point, if you will let me, because I think that you're a very good interviewer. I think you've done your homework. You're asking really cool questions, and I like my audience in Club 19.5 to have access to what we talk about. But anyway, if you go back to our archive and you listen to that 6-hour broadcast on Pluto, the Pluto encounter, July 14th, last summer, July 14th in 2015, exactly 50 years after Mariner 4 went by Mars, I did this special with my friend and colleague Dick Bertel. We interviewed everybody up to and including Alan Stern on live air, where he said, Rex, take note of this, he said on live air that morning, Pluto has a science fiction surface. What the hell did he mean by that?
That's a good question. What did he mean by that?
Well, I think it was a leak. It was a major leak between the lines. Hoagland, you're right. Just keep looking.
You know, it's funny you mention that, Jurassic. Aristarchus is like my favorite area of the moon, just because it looks like it doesn't belong there. It looks like literally somebody cut it out of one place and just slapped it right on the face of the moon. Very, very interesting area. Bob Roberto's still here. Kelly Maynard, what's up, Kelly? Glad you can join us. Sorry, I'm cutting in more and more. If you want me to just stop, just say so in the chat. I'll stop cutting in. Because I know Hoagland is interesting. So, yeah, I love Aristarchus. My favorite area. Some people like Tycho and whatnot, but Aristarchus is mine.
We're looking at Pluto, Rex, at an artificial set of structures, miles and miles and miles of glittering glass enclosures, now, of course, in ruin, incredibly degraded because of age and time and bombardment, but they're the best preserved ruins of anything we have found anywhere in the solar system. And I frankly think, and I said this in a book that I published before the Pluto arrival, in March of 2015, my old publisher, North Atlantic Books, published a book called Pluto, New Horizons for a Lost Horizon, where I laid out predictions for what we would find on Pluto. And what I predicted we would find on Pluto is what we found on Pluto. And that's really important because science is nothing if it's not prediction. So we predicted this. Stern obviously had read this. He knew where I was thinking. So on the show that morning, he gives me this interesting coded line: Pluto has a science fiction surface. And the reason, I think, is because Pluto is in this amazingly highly inclined orbit, 17 degrees, which, by the way, is not a random number. 17 is very important mythologically in terms of hyperdimensional physics and all that. And that highly inclined orbit has allowed Pluto to survive the sandblasting that all the other bodies in the solar system have been subjected to, because it only comes down through the plane of the solar system, twice every orbit. And since the orbit of Pluto is roughly 248 years, roughly half of that, I mean, it's not a circular orbit, so it's not equally divided, but like every 125 years or so, it goes down for a few days through the ring plane of the solar system, which means its exposure to this sandblasting from the incredible amount of debris that the explosion of Planet 5 put into the, Planet 4 put into the solar system back when it was blown to smithereens. That has not destroyed as much the stuff on Pluto or in the Plutonian system, those 5 so-called moons. I'm now beginning to think, Rex, that Pluto was put in orbit specifically as an archive, put in that inclined orbit as an archive, with things orbiting around it as other parts of the archive, including a pristine version of one of the arcologies in orbit that we see in multiple sets on the surface of Pluto in what we call arcology row. And again, all of this is listed in great detail on Keith Laney's website, hiddenmission.com. Simply go to hiddenmission.com and look up all the Pluto stuff and enjoy and enjoy and enjoy.
And it's fascinating, too, when you think about these ancient structures that were built to such extremes, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of thousands, just a long, long time ago. Like, it's awesome. It's absolutely amazing. And it makes me think that just the whole perception on our solar system is completely wrong. We're taught to think that it's, planets away from Earth are just not inhabitable, but clearly the signs show that they are based upon this evidence. And I wonder sometimes, why did we stop sending people to the moon? Do you think it was because they found too much stuff, or what happened?
You want the long answer or the short answer?
Hey, I'd love to have either one of them. If you,
well, we got so much else to cover, and we've only got about 25 minutes left in the show.
Yeah.
So the short answer is yes. We stopped going to the moon because it became too dangerous, because the American people and the rest of the planet would get wind of what's really there. NASA couldn't continue the cover-up, so we had to stop going. Now, they've given us all kinds of excuses. Oh, we're concerned the technology would fail, and oh, we were concerned we would lose astronauts. No, they were concerned that they would be found out. And they got, with Apollo 17, they went to, do you know that Apollo 17 landed at 19.5 on the moon? Now, 19.5, wow, for those who are not familiar, is a key number in hyperdimensional physics. You find it again and again and again. It's the inscribed tetrahedral angle of the energy waves going on inside the sun, every star, the planets, whatever. It creates energy which comes up at the surface at 19.5 degrees on planets and on the sun during the peak of the sunspot cycle. The peak sunspot latitude is about 19.5 degrees, and you see over and over and over NASA launching and landing spacecraft when, angles in the sky, angles with the sun, angles with other celestial bodies is 19.5 degrees. So that is kind of one of these symbolic watchwords. Well, that latitude is the latitude of the landing site of Apollo 17 within a tenth of a degree. Do you remember 3 years ago in 2013 when the Chinese landed their first robotic spacecraft on the moon?
Yes, I do.
You remember where they landed?
No.
44 north and change. That's latitude. And 19.5 degrees west longitude. In other words, totally symbolic. There's nothing physically where they landed that would be unusual geophysically, but they landed politically, symbolically, to reinforce the idea of 19.5 to everybody who knows what that means, who's looking on that mission. So yeah, the Chinese are fully aware on all this, and they obviously are proceeding with their moon program. Do you know their next plan is to land a spacecraft on the far side of the moon?
Now, that would be fantastic, because that's probably where the real gems are on the moon.
Funny you should say that, because it's true. And the reason it's true is not because folks are parking things on the far side so we can't see them. Near side, far side, the moon rotates once a month, so there's a side we get to see and a side we don't get to see. No, the far side of the moon is also the place where stuff is much less destroyed because of that ancient bombardment. Something has happened with the moon in the last X million years since the war, 65 million years. And the moon is now orbiting the Earth, looking at the Earth in a way it did not look at the Earth back then. In other words, I think if you were to look at the moon when the solar system was still the way it had been modified, when there was an incredibly thriving, high-tech Type 2 civilization all throughout it, I think if you've been on the Earth looking up at the moon, you would not have seen the familiar features of the moon we see tonight. The moon would have been rotated to the left by 90 degrees, meaning that the face that we see of the moon actually was 90 degrees to the left, meaning it was the facing side of the moon as the moon orbits around the Earth. And it was that facing side that got hit by all the debris. Remember, two cars colliding head on? And
Right.
the trailing side would have been much more protected. And then when that 90-degree rotation occurred, for whatever reason, it might have been the impact that caused Mare Orientale to form on the moon in the southern hemisphere at 19.5 degrees. If you want to kill a planet, if you want to kill a civilization, you want to destroy it utterly so nothing survives, you hit it at one of these energy points. And somebody apparently directed an impact at 19.5 south, which created Mare Orientale, which is a basin on the moon which is thousands of miles wide. And the eruptions, the external eruptions after things had occurred in the center of the moon from the input of all that enormous energy came up and created many of the dark seas that we see now as the ancient, face of the man on the moon. Those are the imprints of the ancient cities in my model reconstruction, and everything was shifted 90 degrees to the right. So the far side of the moon now was really the backside of the moon then, meaning it was protected from a lot of destruction. So if the Chinese are now going from a landing on the front side of the moon at 19.5 to a landing on the far side of the moon, these are all robots now, is it possible it's because they now know they figured out what I figured out based on what they found, and they now know the good stuff, the preserved stuff, may be on the far side, and that's why they're going there?
Well, and there's a few other questions I'm going to bring up about the moon. There's a lot of speculation that it could possibly be artificial. There's evidence, I guess, that points to it being somewhat hollow. If that's true, correct me if I'm wrong there. And also,
the evidence that's indicating it's hollow is wrong. Let me start with square one.
Great.
All right, I agree. The moon is probably it isn't artificial. Unlike Iapetus, which I think is completely remade. Our Iapetus is a spacecraft, a 900-mile wide spacecraft with lots of space inside. I think the moon is natural, meaning it has a core, it has a mantle, it has a crust, it's had normal planetary development. It was brought here from somewhere else by this incredible high-tech civilization. It was then placed in orbit around the Earth as a means of creating a favorable environment for advanced life, because we now know that without the moon, life on Earth would be impossible. I believe it was brought here about 500 to 600 million years ago, a little over 500 million years ago. That's when I think the whole solar system was remodeled and remade. That's when the cosmic engineers, as I've dubbed this invisible, incredibly advanced civilization, came here and decided to create another garden so that life intelligence could develop and flourish and evolve and find out what it was supposed to do. And if that's true, if all that's true, then the experiment with conscious life in the solar system came to an incredibly tragic benchmark because we had the war. In other words, conscious beings high spiritually connected beings, for some reason, went to war with absolutely gargantuan, world-changing weaponry, which managed to destroy one, left the solar system, this rearranged solar system for life, in ruins. And now we have to go and pick up the pieces and figure out what went wrong, and I guess which side we wound up on.
Right. Well,
Because we're not very conscious, are we? As a species, are we conscious? No.
as the overall human archetype, I would definitely say no. I do think that there are certain individuals like yourself and other listeners to this broadcast that really are awake and have a higher level of consciousness. And you know, Richard, that brings me to the next thing. I almost feel as if your consciousness equates to your spark or your spirit essence. You know, everything is information at some level. So it's as if the more information you gain, the more your conscious evolves and the more you become spiritually. Would you agree with that?
That's not a bad idea. That's not a bad metric, as they used to call it, a way to measure things. It's really all about your connectedness. And again, the connectedness of...
I might have to debunk that last one as a bird. It looked like it was cruising that way, but I won't know till I look at it tomorrow. I did write down the timestamp on it, but I'm thinking it might have been a bird or a bat of some sort. So, but yeah, keep your eyes open. I don't think it's going to be over yet. Gerald, I am in Pennsylvania. Paul is running the scopes. He is down in Miami, Florida. And I should, while I'm on here, say what's up to Gerald and James Muncie. I guess Michael Salos decided to go. James Miles. But go to 58. Let's see. I already got James Muncie there. Anybody I'm missing? Anthony Hotch. Darlene Stevenson. Welcome, guys. Only went up a little bit in the chat. I don't want to forget anybody. Yeah, we have a pretty good crowd tonight. What's up, Rocco Calzone? I'm actually surprised at the crowd tonight. It's pretty big for a Thursday night. Oh well, we could just keep watching. Once again, if you happen to see anything that we don't catch, just throw a timestamp up in the chat box. Clock's up at the top, obviously. What's up, Corinne DeWinter? I think I'm saying that right. DeWinter. Rocco says Hawaii says hola. Well, hola to you too, Rocco. Welcome to 2016, where we sit and have a nice view of the moon. The moon, man, you can tell I'm tired of the moon on the internet. That's good, man. The more eyes, the better. I'm surprised we haven't seen some of our other guys on here, like Chris from Tape Backspace or Bill up there from the Skywatch. I'm surprised I haven't seen any of those guys. I don't even know if those guys are streaming tonight. Hopefully, Chris does, because usually his weather's pretty much the same as ours. What's up, Jason Orlando's? Andres Pineda, I believe. Let's see. Tana is here. Welcome back, Tana. Amsterdam. NASA is hiding UFOs on their live stream. Yeah, that's pretty much normal. Or are they? Yeah, guys, it's going. I should tell you guys, in 3 weeks, Paul is heading out to Colorado, and he will be doing the scoping from out there, and it is going to be absolutely fantastic. It's probably going to be the best views that we have ever gotten. Just imagine these like close-up views without all the atmospheric distortion and it making all the wiggly lines and everything, and the and the quote-unquote lunar waves. But yeah, it won't have any of that. We'll be clear because we'll be above the clouds. We'll be closer to space as it would. It'll be way up in the mountains, way up high. We should be able to image planets very clearly from up there. I believe he plans on doing Jupiter, Saturn, Mars. We might even be able to get a peek at Venus, but I'm not positive yet, and possibly even Mercury. So he's going to be way up there, and I cannot wait for that. We're going to do a couple really long broadcasts, because I think he's going to be up there for a week and a half, so over the next moon cycle. This is going to be pretty awesome. What's up, Doc Cotton? Corey Southern? Yeah, Corey Southern. I think James Miles already said hi, too. I'm not sure, though. Forgive me if I say your name twice. I'm kind of just peeking over at the chat here while trying to adjust this, the visuals for you guys. So I'll jump back off here. I'll let you listen to the rest of Hoagland. And then it's up to you guys whether you want music after this, some crappy copyright-free music, or you want me just to put on another interview with somebody else. Just let me know in the chat, and then we'll see how long we go for after that. So thanks, everybody. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit subscribe. We're probably going to be doing this all week, as long as we have clear skies. So, yeah, especially this weekend, we're going to be doing probably long ones, probably 6 or 7 hours a night. So you definitely want to subscribe for that. But let me know if you want music or you want another interview after this one's over. All right? And I'll jump back on in a little bit. What's up, Dave Butler? Don't want to forget about you. I think I got everybody else. Oh, Renwin Outcast. All right. All right, guys, I'll be back.
All sciences are connected. So all the stuff we've talked about ultimately has connections, and the art form is to try to move the connections in the direction where you get more advancement, more knowledge, more breakthroughs, and particularly on the political front, as consciousness is changing. Remember, I've said, don't know whether you've heard me say over and over again over the last several years, that as the physics is changing, the good are getting better and the bad are getting worse. Remember that?
Right.
Okay. Last night, as I'm waiting to do an interview on ABC in Los Angeles, I'm just kind of flipping through the channels, and they're running Captain America, the first Avenger, again.
Yeah.
So I kind of, sit there. I'm waiting, nothing else to do. I know what I'm going to say. So I'm kind of watching Captain America. And however many times you watch these movies, you always miss something. Because there's a session kind of midway through the film where, remember the German scientist who would develop this incredibly enhancing serum that turned, Steve Rogers into a superhero?
Yep.
He gives him the injection, and then he's talking about, what will happen and why he was selected. He wasn't the best soldier. He wasn't the most aggressive. He didn't have the killer instinct. He was a good man. And what this German scientist in the film says to Steve Rogers, sitting, 2 bunk beds side by side, and they're holding glasses of schnapps because they're going to toast to his experiment the following day. He says, but Doc, why me? And he says, because this creates the context where the good get great and the bad get worse. In other words, in the Marvel film, Captain America is the central premise of hyperdimensional torsion field physics, that if you increase this connection to source, not only physically does it improve you, the metaphor of the superhuman, Steve Rogers, but it also reaches deep into your soul and it magnifies the intrinsic qualities of you as a human being. The good will become great. Right there in those 2 lines is the encapsulation of our physics, our research, what we think happened, what we think is going on now, and what we think can happen if we can reconnect humanity with source and do it by understanding this physics and overcoming the horrible, shattering after effects of the Great War.
Right. And, with this virtual reality type simulation that we seem to be in called life, it's definitely real, but if you look at physical matter at a electron microscope, you can't get to that finite point. It's just protons, neutrons, and electrons oscillating in different frequencies. So essentially,
and ultimately, it may all be fields. It all may be fields of force. Matter, as we think we know it, may not exist at all. It's all changeable fields of force in a matrix.
Yeah, red
Does that
pill
sound familiar?
or blue pill, Neo.
We could not, Rex, we could not have had this conversation even 5 or 10 years ago.
Right.
You know why?
Just
Because all of the popular culture stuff that's out there that I think is being put out there deliberately by high conscious beings. Oh my God, he just said Hollywood is high consciousness. I think there are light workers involved in these industries, and they're all coming together now, either consciously or unconsciously, to create these windows of our real history, our real reality, who we really are, and we're interpreting them.
Alright, let's see. Looking at the chat again. Can I see the flag again? No, you cannot. The flag is not visible from our Earth-based telescope. None of the Apollo landing sites are. The images that they get for that is actually done through the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. That's how Google Earth and everything got those images. You can't, no matter how big your telescope is, you'll never see it from an Earth-based telescope. Just FYI. So what's up, Roboiz, I guess. Frederick Von Cold, Dr. Leroy Green, Ramayama. That's an interesting name. Ginger Lee. Great to have you guys all out. Yes, Frederick Von Cold, you can see Saturn's rings. And I'm surprised he actually hasn't shot over to Saturn yet. Sometimes we do, like last night we shot over there for a little bit. That's on yesterday's video. The timestamp. Someone post up the timestamp for Gerald on that object passing, if they get a chance, or if they have it. I wrote it down here. I think it's 9:39:37. I think is what I had on the timestamp anyway. What's up, Rick Jackson? Let me adjust this here. This is what I do when I talk on mic and I forget to do my job. There we go. Lighten them craters up a little bit. So how's everybody doing tonight? Everybody just decided they wanted to watch a little bit of moon tonight? Nothing much going on? I have to say, this is a pretty big crowd for a Thursday night. Why are I'm guessing you meant stars. Stars aren't visible because the moon's projecting all the light. It's pretty much dimming out everything in the back. If he would move off of the moon to the left or to the right where the moon actually wasn't in the scope or camera vision, you would see the stars. What's up, Buzz Chopper? 23 Buzz Chopper. Tana, no, I will not play Major Tom only because it's copyrighted, and that means as soon as this video ends, they'll strike it, and it's just a big pain in the ass. That's why I don't play copyrighted music unless I intentionally plan on deleting the stream. Which streams like this, when we have a lot of people, I like to keep it. I like to keep it up so people can go back and look at it the next day and review stuff if they want to. Let's see what other questions we got here. How good can you see the other planets with that telescope? We can see every planet. In the wintertime, we can get even better. We can get Neptune. Pretty much all of them except for Pluto. Can't really see what Pluto's not really considered a planet, is it? Let's see. Anybody else in here? Yes, Professional Russian. It's an object flyby. I'm pretty sure it was a bird, but I'm not positive. I won't know until tomorrow. I did write down the timestamp, but I'm not sure what it was. No, this Mr. Black. This moon does not have a puke green tint It is just a filter to bring out more contrast. Sometimes we'll have it a little red tint. Depends on, you know, where the light is in the craters and whatnot. But this one seems to bring out a lot of contrast when we zoom in. Any confirmed UFOs? No, not yet. We do have a couple. I have a couple videos on the channel of some ones we were looking over. One of them got some pretty international attention for some reason. We're not sure what it is, but I'm not sure. We still don't know what it is. A lot of people said it was a bug. Some people said it was a balloon. I know it was something we don't get very often. So I decided to isolate that little section and put it up and let everybody kind of figure it out for themselves. Check 950 black. Oh, are you talking about the 950 black around disk? Okay. Well, it might be. As I said, I can't go back. I mean, you guys can, but I can't because I'm actually streaming it. Cheese tastes like shit, just so you know. We can zoom in pretty close, but once we, like, since he's down in Florida, you get in close to those craters, they really start getting wobbly on you, especially because of all the humidity in Florida. Seb says man never landed on the moon. All right. Guess everybody has an opinion. Any thoughts about shadows? No, they move around just like everywhere else. Why does the sun shine on a down angle? I'm not sure why it would be shining on a down angle. This is not the orientation of the moon. We half it up and actually turn the camera so the moon, the lit part, is at the top. So you're looking at a half a moon. If he was at the right orientation, you'd be looking at, you know, the lit part on the right hand side of the screen. Mr. Black selling some moon dust if anybody wants any. Julie's testing something. Where on the moon are the Rothschild mansion? I do not know. We may spot it someday. Yeah, Mr. Black is probably on the dark side. Seb also thinks the Apollo missions were a hoax. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I'm a believer that we did go to the moon. I mean, I know it might be in the minority here, but I believe we did go. Once again, only my opinion. The camera, all the information, Andy, is down in the description. Everything that we're using. I believe it's an Orion Starshoot HD. It's pretty much a deep space imaging. Let's see here. Anything else? I guess I can turn this on a little bit. Nice foam ball. L-Whiff. Well, thank you. We'll put it up there ourselves. Aristarchus is in the shadow. Yeah, it will be coming out to play soon. Interesting thing we found through the lens. We found a lot of interesting things through the lens. As I said, we got months and months and months of moon streams backlogged. Is there moisture on the moon? From Timothy Reed. I think they did actually discover some moisture on the moon, didn't they? At one of the poles, they found some ice deposits or something. I don't remember offhand. A lot of nutbars think the moon is nothing more than a hologram. Yeah, there are some people out there that think it's a hologram. There are some people out there that believe that there's a lunar wave. There are some people out there that believe we live on a flat Earth. Unfortunately, I'm not one of any of them. But you can be, because everybody's entitled to their own opinion. But I just prefer that you not try to convince me otherwise. But if you believe it, more power to you. Daniel Lee Butler, the moon is a fascinating world. I agree. Very fascinating. That's why we spend our free time looking at it and mapping it and putting it on the internet for you, or for anybody that wants to take a peek that don't usually get to see it up close. James Collins, I thought the moon was a hologram that produces its own light. Okay. Why did they launch a nuke to the moon? I don't know if they did launch a nuke to the moon. As far as I know, they just intentionally crashed a satellite into the South Pole to check for hydrogen and oxygen plumes. Oh, Timothy Huff. The Earth isn't flat. What shape is it? I'll leave that up to you to decide. Alright. Beetlejuice is in the house. Corey Sutherland. Jeremy Ramsey. Truth Seeker. Bob Roberta is still here. Rarest 317. I already explained where the stars are. Just as again, if we weren't on the moon and he goes to the moon where the moon's not taking up and pilfering the light, you'd be able to see the stars. Chat's going pretty quick. Yeah, I heard that story too, that it rang like a bell when it crashed. When will the mining start? I'm guessing the mining is going to start as soon as we can get there, and we'll start mining helium-3 and see if we can't come up with some great propulsion techniques. KB Basinger says the Earth is flat for sure. Congratulations. I'm glad you have confirmed it. Yeah, I know, Tim. The chat's going so fast, I'm just kind of reading off here. No technology to go to the moon. Okay. Yeah, Apollo landing hope seems to be a good one. A lot of people go to. But hey, if they believe it was fake, let them believe it was fake. Everybody has an opinion, so no biggie. But I'll be back in a little bit. I'm going to take care of a couple things, see how long Paul wants to go yet. Alright guys, I'll be back. Alright, I'm going to give the last shout out to the night. We'll still be going for a little bit yet, but I figured I'll jump on here one last time. Minecraft minigames, what's up? Truth Seekers here. Zeb still here. Carrie Draconis. Mowak. Mowak founded his rover. Jason Morash. Mozzarella Ball. Country Cook. Oliver. Jesse Amon. Sydney Lowry. Corey's still in the house. JRS Artworks. JP. Tom K. Texas Brigade. Apollo 17, 1972. I'm glad that all of you could join us, no matter what opinions you have. And as I said, this channel's pretty lenient, as long as you don't start personally attacking anybody. We're good to go. Everybody can have whatever opinion they want, and it is fine. We're going to keep it on this wide field view for a good while until we wrap up. What's up, Renwin? Free from Fears in the house. And oh, I just missed that one. Anna, Terry C? CY? Thunderclouds. What's up, Thunderclouds? KB Basinger. I think I mentioned you out before. Sorry guys, it's just this is actually quite consuming us, because believe it or not, on a normal night we have 30 to 50 people come in. For some reason it just blew up tonight. For some reason, I'm not really sure why. So this many people, actually the chat running this fast usually isn't a normal thing. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining. As I said, the more eyes the better. The more people in here getting to know one another, even better. I know ever since we started doing this, we made some pretty good friends, including other streamers, which actually I should check and see if anybody else is streaming. That way when we wrap up, I can point you towards another one. But if you want a couple names, Take Back Space, if you want to look up that channel, he does great stuff. He's improving daily. he's pretty much got the bug and got new telescopes, and as soon as they allow 4K streaming on YouTube, he's going to be there as well as we are. Let's see, anybody else in here? Jay Runyon, because aliens, man. Minecraft minigames. Jenny. Sheik Zim, where are you? I am in Pennsylvania. The telescope is in Miami, Florida, being run by a guy named Paul. And I should make this announcement again. Once again, in 3 weeks, we will be, or I should say Paul will be, out in Colorado in the mountains. And I do expect to get the clearest views that we have ever gotten since we have been doing this. So just so you know, subscribe if you want to make sure to get updates on that. That will be coming in the near future. As I said, about 3 weeks. Why is it so taboo to ask questions about a flat earth? It's not taboo. A lot of people have questions. Truthfully, I cannot believe how many people believe in a flat earth. I mean, that's just me. But, Jay, the only reason I know your last name is because I'm a big Philadelphia Eagles fan, and we had John Runyon for all them years. That might be considered cheating, but yeah, that's the only reason I knew how to say that. Let's see. Just Casey, how you doing? From Texas. Catanista, Danville. I am in Charlottesville. All right. Victoria, do you ever see UFOs? Yes, we have them on the channel. We have a couple that we couldn't identify. I'm not sure what that means. I bet this would be great on a full moon. Actually, believe it or not, Darlene, full moons suck. And let me tell you why. Full moons, it's like a straight on view. There's hardly any contrast. The best we can get is around the edges of the moon, which ain't really all that spectacular. Our favorite parts are, an eighth to, pretty much almost full. We like, and especially that we can do it on consecutive nights where the shadow drops a little more every night, or we can really get in there with the contrast and whatnot. But yeah, full moon is probably our most horrible time to shoot the moon with a telescope. I mean, it looks cool and everything, but if you want to get up close and get into craters, full moon is definitely not the way to go. Let's see, we got Julie from Aussieland. I'm guessing that's Australia. Miss Precious from Cincinnati, Ohio. Jose Paulo from Brazil. Julie, once again, hostfordummies.com. And we have one named Knight. And Rick Rock. The dispensary sells the moon weed. Get it while you can. Jimbo. How close can we get to the moon? We can get to the point where we're about 220 miles up. If we had to measure it. It's about that. Bank 007. Renwin still here. J.I. Maggie. Just Casey. DeWalt K. Sorry. Love changes everything. Don't know how I got here. Yeah, it seems to be a thing from a lot of people. But a lot of people seem to be coming in. Sorry, I'm still texting Paul. So I should say this just to see what our spread is here. Where is everybody from? You can say just a state, or you can say the city and the state. It doesn't matter, or even country. I know we did have a couple people, but yeah, where's everybody from? I'm kind of interested, just to see. Focus the camera on North Korea. It just exploded a nuke. That's alright. That seems like their problem. I think if they did, it wouldn't get much past their own borders anyway. Yeah, Carrie. It could be an octagon. Why not? New York, Texas. Wow. UK, Texas. Australia, Germany, Florida, Illinois, Colorado, North Carolina, Minnesota, Massachusetts, Arizona, New York, Florida, Queensland. Wow. We are truly all over the place. Well, thanks for joining us, guys. I know it's especially since most of you don't know how you ended up here. What's up, Chris Lavoie? I guess it's Lavoie. Boll Weevil. Man has never been to the moon. Yeah. Jersey, Silicon Valley, California, Maryland. Wow. There are a lot of you tonight. All I can say is thank you. Appreciate every one of you for coming in. Paul is just losing his mind right now with how many people are watching. Oh, he loves it. Good job to my moderators tonight. I believe some of you are still around. I know Jenny's still around. I believe Rockstar is still around somewhere. Stumble upon bought you here. Really? Stumble upon. So I see we have a good mix of flat earth people and globe earth people and fake moon landing people. That's good. Variety is good. And Rare says these pics are fake. Yeah, I know. You don't like my CGI? I thought it was actually pretty good. Darn. Mark asks how many people are watching. Right now, 383. We're approaching 400. Javier, so what's this about? This is just a moon watch, Javier. We check out the moon, and when it's clear, we can go zoom in on craters and see some very weird stuff. We have caught some very weird stuff. We hope to catch some more very weird stuff. And as I said, the more eyes, the better. Alright. I'll tell you what, I will be right back. Looking like Paul wants to go. Paul wants to go for a little bit more yet, so I'll be right back, and maybe I'll do another shout out then, if anybody wants them. Oscar Diaz, what's up? All right, yeah. Okay, I will be right back, people. Hold on for me. Sorry for the big blob encroaching on the screen. It looks like Paul forgot to move the satellite dish. He's doing that now, so it should be out of the way in a second. Alright, he's got the satellite dish moved. I see a bunch of new names in here. Darren Leonard, Bruce Clark, Chad Jurgens, Jason Orlando's still here. Rick Rock's still here. Deborah, Mr. Runyon, Nevier, Fabio. You can take pictures of a hologram. Okay. Mike thinks he sees ETs. Kassarion, MWR, GTR. What's up, FFP08? What's up, Thunderclouds? Don Jovi, Dominic Massey, the Baxt 70, Rick Road, I believe. Have you ever seen something not normal on the moon or around it? Yes, and we have videos of it, Miss Precious, and they're on the channel. Dubious Honey. Yeah, go to Dubious Honey if that's a channel. I saw that before already. What's up, Alvaro? The Back 70. Wade Parsons. This chat is zooming tonight. Philadelphia, yeah, my neck of the woods. Too bad it's going too fast. I can't read the name on it. Bella Girl something. Beta Omega, what's up? Brandon Thomas. If you guys go back in the stream a little bit, you can go back a little while. You can see we were up really close. The thing is now it's going lower in the horizon. It's really hard to get close in on the craters without them going all wobbly on us. So that's why if you really want to see it, tomorrow night's the night to do it. Tomorrow night, right around dusk, it's going to be right around straight up. So we'll have about an hour and a half where it's straight up above us, where it's going to be really clear, and we'll really be able to zoom in on everything. As of right now, as you can tell, it's getting more and more wobbly as it drops in the horizon. So yeah, we might zoom in a little bit, but it's not going to be anything like we did earlier. But as I said, you can go back and look at that if you want to. I should ask my moderators, are any other of the other guys streaming? Anybody know about? And I should ask Jade to put your name up in the just say something on the chat so I could. There we go. That's what I need right here. Mr. Jade. Hey, come back here. There we go. Just for a little help out, just in case. Alright. David Troya, Tony Shawman, I believe that was. Mark Pascal. Isa, welcome, Isa. What's up, Jimbo? Angelo Giuliano still. Nagelpunk. Can we zoom in on the flag? No, once again, you cannot see any of that stuff from our Earth-based telescope, no matter how big it is. Hello from the UK. That was Dominic. And Dwayne Christian. It is fake. Yep. Fake as all get out. Oliver. And Dan Anime King. What happens if you touch the moon? Well, you have to get there first. Spam Bucket. So Chris is doing the plans right now. Okay, good. I'll throw up a link to him when we decide to go off. So he is on live right now. Spam. Very good. Sam from Malaysia. Yes, narrator can see these live texts. Beta Omega. Lucky. The moon is a hologram. Went over that earlier. Moon sex. Don Jovi. You little pervert. Mars and Jupiter. Yeah, they are actually Mars and Saturn, I believe, are by one another tonight. Once again, Mars and Saturn are low on the horizon as well. We wouldn't get it. Wouldn't get a very good view of it right now. Jeremy Kling. It's a fake video. Yeah, we heard it all before, Mr. King. Everything's fake. Yeah, the moon is going. We had some clouds roll in. Hologram went out. Oh, God. Man doesn't understand the moon. I would agree with that one. Sven de Varenes, I believe. Sudie Gwynn. Michael William. Nickel S. Yeah, subscribe to Nickel S. Why not? I'm not sure what he does, but. Orazdo. David Gagnon. Andy Shands. What's up? Corinne DeWinter. What time tomorrow? It's usually around dusk time, Eastern Standard Time. So we'll probably try to go in between 7:30 and 8 right now. That would be the safest bet. I will make an event thing for it, so it will give you a notice that what time we're going to go live. The moon is racist. I agree. Fresh A says it's fake. Why did they fake the moon? I'm not sure. If the moon is fake, they've been doing it for an awful long time, considering there's text and even rough cave paintings of the moon thousands of years old. So they must know what they're doing. Hey, live feed from orbit would be pretty cool. Master Decoy, Alvaro, Soldier, Allie Bedford. Yeah, Allie, we're gonna be doing we're gonna be zoomed out here for a little bit, just doing what we call a wide field, which is basically just framing the part of the moon that's in the sun's light. Munson, Ontario, TJ Cooper. TJ, we do see satellites pass in front of the moon, actually quite a bit. Doomsday, I am in Pennsylvania. I'm not sure if that was... Dredge. Dredge is tilted. Judy Usher. Well, you are welcome. Glad to have you. NASA's fake. Man, we just got a lot of fake NASA people. That's alright. NASA's used to it by now. I work for SpaceX CIA. I wish. I'd be making a lot more money than I am now. Thank you, Miss Ferraris. I'm guessing that is. I have to admit, there is a lot of really good documentaries out there about fake moon landings and stuff. I should say, yeah, if anybody sees anything crossing the moon that we're not sure what it is, like we've had a lot of little crazy black dots flying all over the place. That's why I keep the atomic clock up on the screen so we could timestamp it in the chat box, and that way I can write it down and look at it tomorrow to see if it was anything or not. Just so you know, that's why that clock's there. Plus, it's a lot easier if we see something to point people back at the point in time when they saw it. Just comes in handy. Case in, the moon just doesn't disappear. Fake as fuck. Well, yeah and no. See, there's a thing called clouds. They do tend to disrupt the viewing of the moon. Yeah, usually I'll see it if I see something in my feed, because my feed's about 30 seconds before yours. I'll usually try to say something in the chat box so you guys can check it out, or warn you that something's coming. Riley County, West Virginia. Welcome, Charlie. Bernard wants to send Hillary there. NASA never a straight answer. Yeah, I've heard that before too. You never know. Alright, I want to take a little break again and shoot some text down here to see how long he wants to go for. I'll just up this music for a little bit. I'll be back in a couple minutes. Continue to talk amongst yourselves. I'll be back, guys. Alright guys, we are going to start wrapping it up until tomorrow night. Hopefully skies are good. Remember, if you really want to see into the craters good, be here early. I said before, if you get here early enough, the moon will actually be right overhead, and that's the best time for us to do the craters. It's the less atmospheric disturbances, it'll be less wobbly, we can really get in there. So yeah, we're gonna wrap it up for the night, and hopefully be back tomorrow night, and hopefully be back with a couple long streams over the weekend. If you haven't subscribed, feel free to do so. As I said, we do this every chance we get. We usually go on a week or two bender a month when the moon comes up, or we can start actually doing it at this time of night. We try to do it every night that we can. So yeah, so I appreciate everybody coming out, everybody that even even the people that says it's fake, you are appreciated as well. But so yeah, we're gonna wrap it up. Thanks to the moderators, I appreciate it. I'm not sure where all of you came from, but it was nice having you anyway, and hopefully you'll be back in the days coming. So yeah, we'll leave it on for about another 5 minutes or so and let it wind down, and then we'll be going. So be sure to subscribe if you didn't, and we'll see you tomorrow night. Later, guys.